2018's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was a breath of fresh air, not just for the superhero genre, but for the world of animation as a whole. So this movie, Across the Spider-Verse, has such huge expectations, there's no way it could live up to them. Right? Hey movie fans, so I just got back from seeing Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Now, Into the Spider-Verse, like I said, was a breath of fresh air and a pleasant surprise for a lot of people, myself included. They just kind of looked at it and go, oh yeah, just another animated Spider-Man movie. But in reality, it's one of the best, and for many people, the best Spider-Man movie made to date. And I'd argue until now. That's right. Across the Spider-Verse is one of, if not the best Spider-Man movies ever made. But not just that, it is one of the most visually gorgeous and downright stunning movies, period, I have ever seen, let alone an animated movie. Let's break it all down, the positives, the few negatives that I have, because it's not a perfect movie, but as far as 2023 goes, it's darn close to being perfect, and I'll say that on the record now. But first of all, the positives. I mentioned it briefly, but holy crap, this movie is one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen. They talked about in the marketing leading up to this movie how in the different universes, all of them have different art styles. So I was kind of wondering how that would manifest. Y'all, it is so cool to see these different art styles being projected. Like, you kind of know what Miles' world looks like, but without dipping too much into spoilers, his looks drastically different than other Spider-Man's universe, but Gwen's universe. That, I'm not going too much into it, but I believe Gwen's universe needs to be studied in all animation studios going forward, because it is so gorgeous and there's so much happening all the time in those scenes that I just was blown away with the animation. I know that the directors are like, yeah, we know it took us 5 years to make this movie, but trust us, it's worth it. And you can tell in every single frame of this movie the love and the passion that went into this. The little like in-jokes and blink and you'll miss it references that were Into the Spider-Verse once again make their way here. But every single frame of this movie feels like a gorgeous piece of art that you could hang on your wall. Any single frame. There's some that are more impactful than others for story purposes, but this movie is one of the most gorgeous movies you're going to see this year, and I need more worlds like Gwen's in animation, because I feel like Gwen's universe was trying some really fun and experimental techniques that I'd never really seen before in animation. And I was like, this is why animation is a genre that needs to be more respected. But I will say, I had reservations going into this movie, I'll be honest. As much as I love Into the Spider-Verse, all the marketing for this movie has been, let's travel the Spider-Verse. Let's see all the wacky cameos that you might see in this movie. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of fun cameos. But one of the best things about this movie is there are cameos, but they don't overdo it in how many or what kind of cameos show up. There's some fun, oh hey, I know that, I remember Barry's moments, but it doesn't overshadow the story as a whole. I was worried leading into this, because all the marketing relied so much on Spider-Verse, that it would take away from Miles' story, which is what we really fell in love with 2018's Into the Spider-Verse. This is still 110% a Miles Morales story in the best possible sense. Miles has grown, but he's at that age where he kind of is ready for the next stage of his life, and his parents aren't ready for him to be at that next stage of life, and they're not ready to be at that next stage of life that would be needed for them as well. It's this great enriching story for both just Miles and his parents. You get both sides. Everyone in this movie has a really interesting full story fleshed out to them for the most part. Like any good sequel, you delve more into the characters, and that's exactly what this movie does. I feel Miles' side of the story, I feel his parents' side of their story. It all works together. It is still a deeply personal story. It's still all about Miles. There just happens to be other Spider-Verse people out there, but it's still 100% about him. But if there was a co-lead, I'd say Gwen Stacy is it in this. Gwen takes on a much more prominent role this time around, and honestly, she crushes it. There's some truly heartfelt moments with her in this movie. She's a much more interesting, complex character this time around. I think everyone is, but she has a lot more to do this time around. We can't go fully into it because we're going to be spoiler free here, but Miles, it is still his story, but Gwen still has a very strong presence in this movie as well that I think makes for a much more interesting and well-rounded narrative, especially setting us up for Beyond the Spider-Verse, which will lead us to some of the negatives I had. The people that I saw this with, and I see this being a common criticism, just a heads up, we're not going to say what it is, but some people have been frustrated with how this movie ends. I won't say what that means, but some people aren't feeling like it's resolute enough or it's too cliffhanger-y. I understand those criticisms. I don't agree, but I can kind of see where people are coming from, and I'm going, yeah, I kind of see it. I'm not of that camp, but just be prepared that the ending of this may leave you kind of going, oh, okay, that's the direction we're going with this. I didn't expect that. But the other negatives that I'm seeing, and maybe it was just my theater, but from everything I'm seeing online, other people are having this issue too. The first 20 to 30 minutes of this movie were oddly quiet. So I don't know if it was my theater having some sound issues, but I've seen some other people that had some audio problems as well. And I talked to everybody after we got out of the theater. We're like, y'all have a hard time with the first 20 to 30 minutes, so whether there's some weird audio calibration issues, I'm hoping it's with the theater and not with the actual cut itself, but yeah, that was kind of weird. I also said there's a bunch of Spider-Verse people in this, which is great. Some of them, because it's a Miles story through and through, some of the really interesting ones or some of the returning ones that we know and love don't get as much screen time as you'd like them to get. They have some stuff, but they kind of get backburnered, which I kind of hope plays more a factor in the next one. Like, it's complicated because you got this big diverse cast of characters that you're all throwing into the pot, and some characters that you love from the last one, they just don't get as much to do, or there's some great new characters. I'm going, let's spend more time with them. And maybe that's Sony's whole plan, is we're gonna spin these off. I don't know if they are or not, but some characters I felt got a little shortchanged. In doing so, they're just setting up Miles, which is, it's just fine, but certain characters I could have used another scene or two from. I will say the movie also starts a little slow. Not the slowest start for a comic book movie, but I felt the pace a little bit, but once we get fully into Miles' story, then I think it just really picked up, and then we just chug right along. This movie is 2 hours and 20 minutes, and for the most part, you don't really feel it. The beginning, I felt it a little bit, but that was about it. After that, we're just going at a breakneck pace. Then rounding us back out with some positives, there's multiple antagonistic forces, we'll say that. I'm not gonna outright say villain or villains, but there's threats that Miles has to overcome, and they're all very interesting and unique in their own way. They've hyped up Spot in a lot of the trailers and marketing. Spot is very entertaining because of his skill set lends itself to comedy, but them as a character, at first you're like everyone else, just kind of laughing at this character, going, this is stupid and ridiculous. But what the story they're telling is, it really, really works. And there's other things that stay in Miles' path that make it a much more interesting journey for him that, again, we can't go into spoilers here. But the last 20 minutes is when things start to really kind of reveal themselves and going, okay, this is where all the pieces come together. And I think they come together really, really well. I just was blown away by this movie from a visual standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint. It is definitely a part 2 of a trilogy, so set your expectations correctly that this is a part 2. But that being said, I would still argue that it is a well-told, self-contained story that you're gonna want to see part 3 as soon as possible. Unfortunately, that's not until March, but I think this movie is excellent. I cannot wait to see how they wrap this all up. I continue to love Gwen, Miles, everyone else in the Spider-Verse, the new characters that we see. This is the early candidate for my favorite movie of the year. Just visually stunning. I'm gonna need a lot of the artwork for this movie. But what did you guys think? Have you seen Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse? Are you excited for Beyond the Spider-Verse? Who's your favorite Spider-Man incarnation? I'm curious to see the multiple answers that we can get out of this. Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, if you like what you see and want to see more, subscribe to the channel. And as always, stay sharp, movie guys and gals.